All right, Caroline Ellison is heading to court for a third day of testimony against Sam Bankman-Fried. The former Alameda Research CEO said yesterday on the stand that she was in a constant state of dread, adding that she knew, quote, we would have to take the money from our FTX line of credit, and that was money that could be called in at any time, end quote. Emily, you were actually in court again to watch all of this play out. What stuck out to you?
A lot happened yesterday. So there were a lot of revelations, some of which were more relevant than others to the actual trial. So there was a lot of commotion about, talk about basically paying off Chinese officials there all sorts of stuff came out, but the judge pointed out that these were not actually the actual charges in the case. It was also, a very emotional day, I think, for Caroline. As you said, she brought up a lot this idea that she had been filled with dread for a long time because she had basically been hiding the truth of the finances of Alameda and FTX. And so, she had a sense of relief when it finally all came out. And yeah, it was a lot of drama. There were some tears because, she said she felt this mixture of relief, but she also wanted to take responsibility. So yeah, there was a lot going on in court yesterday.
And there was also this whole thing repeatedly about the spreadsheets, because of course the spreadsheets ultimately led to their undoing when it was revealed by CoinDesk. But even those spreadsheets apparently weren't the spreadsheets that were, even those weren't accurate, and they were pretty damning. What happened with that, and what was your take, as she was telling this story of all these fake spreadsheets and signal messages and all this stuff? What was your impression as she went through all this?
Well, of course, we're watching it. CoinDesk gets this major shout out in court because, Caroline drew a very clear cause and effect between the balance sheet that that Ian Ellison wrote an article about in CoinDesk in November. And that kind of was the beginning of the end. And I think she really cited that as a cause and effect. Like, this is the beginning of the end of FTX's downfall. But Lawrence, as you said, what's interesting about it is, that balance sheet raised a lot of eyebrows because it basically showed two things. One, that there was a lot of FTT on Alameda's balance sheet, and also raised a lot of questions about the relationship between Alameda and FTX. But as you said, she mentioned that actually the real balance sheets were actually worse. This was one that was being shown to kind of like outside parties, third parties, but it actually didn't even reflect the true gravity of the situation. So it's kind of remarkable that this balance sheet that kind of was the beginning of the end of bringing down the entire FTX empire was only part of the story, right? It actually got worse after that. But there was a whole chain of events, right, as you all remember, because it was, the balance sheet being published, then CZ saying that he was liquidating his FTT, so she kind of went through this whole thing and how she was sort of watching this in real time and how, she had this mixture of emotions again, in part, this feeling of relief that, okay, now, like, we don't have to hide this anymore. Everyone's going to know, like, this was a long time coming.
And that was the rosy, that was like a rosy scenario with that balance sheet. In fact, but it seems that everything really started with our dear and lovely friend Do Kwon.
Well, there was, a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, that's really the TLDR of Caroline's testimony, is that there was just, this brewing disaster waiting to happen where, the finances just were not as they seemed to be. And she was part of that misrepresentation.
Emily, cameras aren't allowed in the courtroom. What was the jury's reaction to Caroline's testimony? How did she handle herself on the stand? Talk to us a little bit about what people were feeling in the courtroom.
Yeah, so I obviously can't speak for the jury. Look, I think that Caroline, you can also see just like on crypto Twitter, like some of the reactions to Caroline. I think there are mixed reactions. On the one hand, maybe some people feel sorry for her. On the other hand, she is pleading guilty. She is admitting to these crimes. And, I think one theme that came up again was her cooperation with the prosecution and her cooperation with the government and what that means. And, this was being teased out a lot in court. I guess people feel like it's important for the jury to understand what this means. And basically what it means is that, she agreed to cooperate. That does not mean that, she is guaranteed a lighter sentence. She's not guaranteed anything. And this was sort of brought up again and again, right? It's like, okay, this is a cooperation agreement, and maybe she'll get a letter in the end. There'll be a letter basically to the judge saying, okay, you can have recommending a more lenient sentence, but this is not at all guaranteed. And I really felt like that was being teased out many, many, many times. But yeah, she did start crying. There were tears. There was a box of tissues offered, but to be honest, I'm not sure how much people were moved. And I know we'll get into this with our next guest, Lisa, but there does seem to be the impression that the judge is not very sympathetic to the defense. That's sort of, it's been toned down a little bit from the beginning, but you can kind of tell that he's a little bit impatient with the defense. And so, yeah, I think that is also probably setting a tone.
How accurate are Nick Day's images, the drawings that he's been doing? Right?
She has no eyes, but besides that, I think they're perfectly accurate. So.